We have a test this Friday. Yesterday, we reviewed part of the test, part of the unit. Today, let me review the other part of the unit. So functions, looking at 55 through 60. 55, I have f of t and g of t. And I'm going to do f plus g of -1. So that means that I'm going to go f of -1 plus g of -1. Okay, I have to find out what f of -1 is. So looking at the function f, I'm solving for f of -1. That means the variable, to begin with, the variable was t, but I'm going to replace the variable with a -1. So I have 3 times -1 minus 4. Work all this out. I have a -3 minus 4, because remember, I have to multiply before I subtract. I know -3 minus 4 is -7. So f of -1 is a -7. I also need to find out what's g of -1. So I'm going to use the g function now. I have 3 times a -1 cubed minus 5 times a -1. So that gives me 3 times a -1. Notice I'm going to do the exponent. So -1 times -1 times -1 still stays as a -1 minus 5 times a -1. All I did was the exponent. Now let me do my multiplications. I have a -3 and there's minus a -5. Notice I did my multiplications. Now minus a negative, that changes to plus. -3 plus 5 is 2. So I solved for f of -1. I found out what also was g of -1. Now I just have to add them, right? So I have to go -7 plus 2. And that is -5. And I said I was adding because it's f plus g. It could be f minus g. So in that case, I would subtract. Let's take a look at number 56. Let me find out what's h of -3 and also what's g of -3. Let me find out what's each of them, because I have to do h divided by g of -3. So -3, h of -3, that is what? -3 squared plus a -3. So that is basically 9 plus a -3, better known as 6. All right, let me solve g of -3. It's -3 minus 3. So that's a -6. So now here I'm going to go, remember I'm doing h of -3 divided by g of -3. So I have 6 divided by a -6. Now in the fraction, when there's a negative sign, you bring it to the front. 6 divided by 6 is 1. So my answer here would be -1. Now for 57 and 58, we have what we call composite function. Look at the operation on the inside. It looks like an O. Now, usually I have it as a number. So actually, let me replace my notes. This X, because on the homework, it's just not going to be just an X. It's going to be a number. Let's change my question here as a 3. Let me put a 3 there. So I'm going to solve for f of g of 3. On your homework, I'm not going to keep it as a variable. I'm going to have it as a number. So let me work this out first. What's g of 3? So g of 3 is 3 squared plus 2 times 3, or 9 plus 2 times 3, or 9 plus 6, better known as 15. So g of 3 is 15. Now I'm going to finish this as f, because that's the question on the outside, f of 15. And my 15, I got that from g of 3. So f of 15. Okay, so I'm gonna use the f function now. So I have 2 times 15 plus 5, or better known as 30 plus 5, which is 35. So we did g of 3 first, and then whatever we got, we used it in f. Same thing for 58. Again, I'm not going to use a variable. On your guys' homework is going to be a number, so let me change this n. Which number can we use? Let's use a 5. Why not? Let's use a 5, right? It's just a number. First thing I got to do is g of 5. So g of 5 is -4 times 5, which is -20. Now, because of this g on the outside, I'm going to use g again, but now g of -20. So that is -4 times a -20, which is positive 80. That's it. Then we also learned a couple of days ago how to solve absolute values, looking at 59 and 60. To begin with, let me separate them to the equal sign. The absolute value must be by itself, nothing outside. I see a +2 on the outside. +2, let me move it over as a -2. Opposite operation. So I have the absolute value of x plus 7. It's equal to 1. Now the absolute value is by itself. I'm going to split it as 2 different questions. I'm going to have x over 7 is equal to 1. And I'm also going to have x over 7 equals -1. Right? The number that is by itself, the 1 in this case, one time I wrote it as +1 and the other one as a -1. Now, let me solve for x. Fraction means division, right? It says x divided by 7. The opposite of divide is multiplied. So let me multiply both sides by 7. So these 7s cancel out. And I get x is equal to 7, right? 1 times 7. Same thing on the other side. Let me multiply both by 7. So I get rid of the fraction. And x in this case is equal to -7. Now the answers are not just one of them is positive, the other one's negative. Sometimes the values change. Let's take a look at number 60. We separate them through the equal sign. To begin with, this +6, let me move it over as a -6. So I get that absolute value of p minus 10 is equal to 13. Now I'm going to be able to split it. Let me go p minus 10 equals 13. And then p minus 10 equals -13. All right, in this case, the -10, let me move it over as a +10. So p is equal to 23. In this other case, let me move this as a +10 as well. And I get p equals -3. Notice the values change. Okay. So you guys should be good for the test tomorrow.